name is Anthony George Fitzgerald Pitts.
How old are you now?
I am now 79 years old. I was born here in Cairo on the 1st of August 1942. I will be 80 years old next year.
What are your mother and father's names?
My mother was Mabel McAllister, and she came from Tegucigalpa in Honduras, and she met my father here when he was a young police officer a few years before I was born, because they got married in 1939, and then I have an older sister who was born in 1940. I was born in 1942. My father's name is Valen Patrick Llewellyn Pitts, and he died here in Cairo in the year 2001 at the age of 91.
He lived pretty long. Yes.
Yeah. Now, we are long livers. I remember my granddad was something like 97 years old when he died. So the genes, I hope they don't let me know. I would like to live another 12 years or 15 years.
Okay, Mr. Pitts, with that said, we would like for you to give us your experience of Hurricane Hattie before, during, and after the storm.
Okay. My memory or recollection of this was as a teacher, a young teacher. I had just begun teaching at Worcester College. I was 18 years old, and I remember going home early one day with the news in my ears, because there was a red alert from Jamaica. The advisory from Jamaica had put us all on the alert here because Hattie was doing a lot of damage in Jamaica, and that was the only line of communication we had then, not like how we have now with the computer graphics on TV and all that. We had to listen only auditionally with your ears to the radio announcement. We had no television then. Television came here in 1981. So after the radio announcement, we left school early to go home, planning to evacuate or to batten up the windows or whatnot. Everybody was scampering around trying to make final preparation. Tying up the horses, the hens, the chickens, everything, for getting into the country to high ground. Belize was always regarded as low-lying swamp in case the storms came. So people tried to get out, maybe to Cairo and other places on high ground to escape the storm. So when I went home, I saw my mother preparing, and I just jumped into the ark, trying to save a few things that I had, especially my books and so on. My father, who's a policeman, was stationed in Punta Gorda, so he wasn't there. But because of him being a police officer, we were given the privilege to secure ourselves in the police quarters on Queen Street in Belize. They had a big canteen behind the official building, so that's where we ended up. That was in the afternoon that I came home and I saw preparations around me in the neighborhood, everybody concerned. But I remember a neighbor, very, very close friend of my mother's, and well, I was regarded as a very close friend because one of the young ladies was my girlfriend. Mrs. Florence Wright was living a few blocks away from us, right by the canal side in Burnham Street. And my mother sent to her and said, Florence, you're not going? This hurricane will come because everybody's talking about it and excited. But she was living in a very, very strong, low house. And she said, I'm not going nowhere, man. My mother was Mabel, you know. She said, I'm not going nowhere. We have a good house. We have a shelter right here. My mother left her alone. And so we went on to the police compound, safe ground, because our house was not reliable. We had a very flimsy house standing on stilts. So by evening, everybody had been activated to escape the storm, because now the news is coming and it's a certainty that the hurricane would strike sometime late tonight. When we got to the police headquarters, there were like 40 people 40 families in the big spacious canteen at the back. And we were surprised and said, wow. But we managed to get a little corner where we could, hunker down. Me and 6 siblings and my mother. And we entered into the lively atmosphere there, because even though people were excited, it was a lively atmosphere. Now, one thing I'll tell you about a radio, or at that time it was British and US Broadcasting Service. We didn't even have our independence here. The BSBS radio began to play some beautiful favorite golden oldies and Jim Reeves and Harry Belafonte and all the favorites that were nationally preferred. And we had a good time singing along with all these favorite records. But coming close to 10 o'clock that night, we noticed that there was a lull in the weather. The breeze just stopped blowing, and it was strange. Everything got quiet. And then all of a sudden, the wind began to come in strong gusts, and occasionally, it wasn't right straight up. It would come and last a few minutes and stop, and start again and stop, but increasing. By midnight now, we realized that this storm was coming, because then the rain began to come in. The rain was heavy downpour, and then the wind increased, and some lightning and thunder, and then we were in the middle of it. No, I'll tell you something. It's the first time I had a scare when we thought about losing our lives, because even that big building, the police canteen on Queen Street, even that building began to sway. And the wind was swaying it and swaying it and swaying it and swaying, and people began to pray. I could tell you, when you have an emergency, you see people get religious. They began to pray. And I was praying along with them too, because that building was swaying. Now they had a big building, concrete behind the canteen, and then we were transferred to that one. And from that safer one, we saw the first one that we were in swaying. And we just stood there, petrified. We were petrified for a few hours until towards 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. that morning, things began to lull. But the rain kept coming, and right until about 8 o'clock the next day, the hurricane was still gusting. And when it abated, and we could look out, we saw the devastation, because all through the night, we heard sounds of buildings falling down. Lots of wooden structures fell. And when we opened up our doors the next day and we saw the devastation, all around, right up to the big bridge along Queen Street, you could see the evidence. But the Pastor Building and the Belize Times Press and the Angelos, and then you had the Vogues, those were strong structures, and Valencia, they stayed up. But everything around was devastating. So what we did, we had to wait until the flood subsided. When the flood subsided, the water went down a few feet, then I told my mother, I'm going in the water, which was up to my waist then, to check on all of us, because now we didn't expect to find anything. So I remember putting on a very good pair of shoes that I had just bought from Barter's shoe store on a street in front of Palace Theatre. Went along Queen Street to the big bridge, and standing on the big bridge and looking down towards the ice factory by Riverside Hall and to the fort, it was a strange sight. Lots of buildings went down, and I crawled my way to, at that time, the Royal Bank of Canada. And then you had the Abdu building, and then I saw people who had preceded me coming from the direction of Brody's and Harley's with stuff in their hands because they were looting. that's my main recollection, that people could remember to go looting shortly after the storm. And some were coming with refrigerators and radios and bales of cloth, flour. People know how to hustle. They were looting. So I said, let me go around to Harley's to see what's there. When I got there, oh man, the crowd. But then there was danger still in the water. I can remember a young lady coming with a bale of cloth, and then she got hurt in the water and she had to throw down the bale of cloth because she was hurt. And we had to help her to get to higher ground because in the water when you get hurt and the blood is rolling, you could get tetanus or some other infection. So we helped her to get to the radio building, which was a little bit high up, and there they asked somebody to take her to the hospital. But those are recollections. When I looked around, several other people, hustling and so on, were hurt. And even so, you had to be careful that maybe there were snakes and alligators in the water, because I saw that.
Did your family lose their house? Did your family lose their house during the hurricane?
The house, we didn't lose it because the house fell. It was standing on stilts. The house fell, but everything inside was destroyed.
Did you lose any family member?
No, we didn't lose any family member, but then when I looked around, the news started pouring in about people who we had known who had perished in the storm. Now this is where I remember my mother, she said she had some sixth sense that Mrs. Wright would not survive. And she had been urging Mrs. Wright, let's go to higher ground, let's go. And Mrs. Wright said, no, I'm going to stay in my house in a fortress. Now it happened that Mrs. Wright's son, who became Monsignor Derrick Wright, at that time he was only about 12 or 13 years old. I was a scout master in the Wesley Scout Troop, and I used to take young boys to train them for their swimmer's march at the place they call the Pint, just opposite to Riverside Hall on our side of the town. And I took Derrick many occasions to the Pint to teach him how to swim. He was only about 13 years old then. And when he became confident, I told his mother, I said, Mrs. Flo, make your children learn to swim, because you never know when they will need that swim. And so said it happened. The water came after the hurricane and engulfed the house. The house was low, and only Derrick and his father managed to escape because Mrs. Wright and the two daughters and the younger brother, they didn't know anything about swimming, so they perished in the water. But Derrick escaped. And Derrick always told people, he became Monsignor in the Catholic Church. He always told people that I was the one who saved him, because if he didn't know to swim, he would have died too. Now that's for being a teacher. When you're a teacher, you never know where your influence will end up. And I have been teaching since the age of 18, and I have seen cases where people have come back to me and said, Mr. Pitts, you have been significant in my life as I was developing, and I like that. So the reward to a teacher is enormous.
Yes, sir.
We didn't lose anything
Okay.
in terms of our life,
But you know of people that lose.
But we saw some people who weren't as fortunate as we were right in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Now, one of the things I remember, looking down to Matron Roberts Health Center, we saw commotions there with people dragging out dead bodies and so on. I said, wow. And there was this very, very close friend of mine, a guy named Alfred Ramsey, who at that time used to drive a mule car, an East Indian fellow. That thing always stick in my head because we got news from the grapevine that there were people being rescued from the top branches of a mango tree in Alfred Ramsey's yard. The people ended up swimming around during the storm, so when the water raised itself, they were raised up in the water too, and they ended up in the upper branches of this mango tree, and they were found clinging onto the branches in front. They had clung to the branches, and some of them were dead. Oh. And they couldn't take them away from the branches because the grip, that grip on the branch held them there even after they expired. I always remember that. So when the rescue teams came, some people who were still alive were brought down, and others had to be removed from the branches by unclasping the grips that they had on the branches. It was painful to see or to understand. So those are the things that I remember. One other thing I remember was a young man who used to work with the Belize electrical department, and he used to brag to his friends, I am working with the Belize Electricity Limited. When these guys were strolling along Magazine Road, they saw a wire that was down from the storm, and he rushed up to the wire because he was working with the Belize Electricity, and he grabbed the wire, and his hands froze right there because it was a live cable he touched. And they had to pry him from that wire after he had killed a couple of people who didn't know better. They rushed to his assistance, and then the current went through their bodies too. So about 4 people died right there because when he grabbed and he screamed, that was it. And others tried to help him, not knowing that the current would go through their bodies too. And so, with these few experiences, we managed to get things underway. Next thing you knew that the armed forces, the British people who had a camp at the airport there, 9 miles, the soldiers came in, and then some helicopters began to pour in with food supplies, and things got underway for reconstruction.
Okay, Mr. Pitts, thank you very much for sharing your recollection of Hurricane Hattie with us. Mm-hmm. We know that the public will enjoy your recollection of the events of what happened. Thank you so very much on behalf of Belize National Library Service and Information System.